Okay, and we are live, so we're just going to wait for some people to filter in. I know Grassroots is really excited, my bookstore, to have you guys with us today. So thank you for joining from your separate computer screens.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Happy to be here.
Yay.
Yeah,
So I'm just going to wait for some people to filter in a little bit more, and then I'll give the introduction. I am envious of your bookshelf behind you, Christian. It is
thanks.
Yeah.
My bookshelf. Yeah. It's our daughter color coded it. She really wanted to organize it that way. She actually wanted to do the whole house, but we limited it.
I was just gonna say,
the whole house. But we limited it to the bookshelf. So that that is her handiwork there, the color coding, and it's just a mix of all of our books. We have some scattered about elsewhere too, but yeah. So it's like our daughter's more like YA and stuff mixed in with my stuff and Margie's stuff.
It looks so pretty, but I think that would drive me crazy. Like everything all mixed together.
Oh, I can't find anything. Yeah, I just look and I scan it, and there's another little bookshelf downstairs. So to find one book, I do trips up and downstairs and scan, and usually don't find it. So
smart.
I feel like Stella's done a pretty good job like memorizing where like with the colors, at least of her book. I kind of know sometimes, but yeah, for your books, I never.
Yeah, and I'm also mostly colorblind, and so I'm like, the book may be orange or blue. I don't really know. So
you also take the jackets off your books. So like it's one color and then Christian, like it's so annoying. He'll take the jackets off, they'll be around the house, and then the book is a different color and it could get categorized in a new color or
at a certain point in the reading process, like the dust jacket gets in my way or something. And so in those real feverish reading sessions, you have to like discard the dust jacket.
Oh my gosh, that it looks beautiful, but oh my goodness, that would be so hard. Okay, I've seen if we look like we're at a steady number, so I'm just gonna give a quick introduction. I just want to thank everyone who's joining us for this awesome event. My name is Courtney. I'm the event coordinator at Grassroots Bookstore in Corvallis, Oregon. And today we're really excited to have with us Margaret Kimball for her new book, her memoir, graphic memoir, And Now I Spill the Family Secrets. And she's joined in conversation with her husband, Christian Moody, which is, I think, the best conversation partner. Margaret Kimball is an award-winning illustrator and the author of And Now I Spill the Family Secrets, a graphic memoir about mental illness and family dysfunction. Her work has appeared in The Believer, Ecotone, Lit Hub, Black Warrior Review, South Loop Review, and Best American Comics, with her illustrations being published around the world. Margaret has been in residence at the Bernheim Forest, Yaddo, and McDowell. She lives with her family in Indianapolis. Christian Moody is a fiction writer whose work has been featured in Esquire, AQR, Best New American Voices, The Cincinnati Review, Best American Fantasy, and elsewhere. He's been in residence at Yaddo and was selected as the Sarah Bondi. What is that, Christian?
Good enough. I like that.
Good enough. Okay. Book writer in residence at Burnham Research Forest. He's received fellowships from the Kentucky Art Council, Indianapolis Art Council, Saltonstall Foundation for the Arts, the Charles Taft Center for the Humanities, along with others. He has an MFA in creative writing and a PhD in English, and he lives with his family in Indianapolis. Okay, so the way that this event is going to work is that Margaret is going to start with a reading from her book, and then Margaret and Christian are going to have a conversation, and then we're going to follow that up with the last 10 to 15 minutes for an audience Q&A. So at any time during their conversation, feel free to pop a question for them down in the Q&A chat box, and then we'll use that to run the Q&A at the end. And also the link to buy And Now I Spill the Family Secrets is going to be in the regular chat shortly. And I highly encourage you to buy it from our bookstore, Grassroots. Not only will you be supporting Margaret, but you'll be supporting Grassroots as an indie bookstore that can bring events like this to you. Okay, and without further ado, I'm gonna let Margaret and Christian take it away.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I feel like first of all, we should let everyone know that we're in the same house. They might not know that. you're like right behind me, and that's probably weird.
Yeah.
Also it's probably weird for you that like I'm not wearing a bathrobe, which I have been since like March 2020, but I have a haircut and I'm actually dressed with a shirt and collar. So I must look like a stranger to you. I think you want to read first from your book, is that right?
Yeah, I'm gonna read first.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Can you see the book? Yeah, okay. Okay, so the book is called And Now I Spill the Family Secrets, and it's a memoir, and I'm just gonna read for about 10 minutes from the opening section. And sorry, I think my voice is a little dry, so I'll try to, I don't know, fix that somehow. Okay, chapter 1, The Secret. My mom was 31 when she decided to take her own life. It was Mother's Day, 1988. The morning air in Connecticut was cool and calm, and she asked my dad to take the kids to church himself. She would stay home, the holiday permitting her the excuse to take time for herself. Daffodils bloomed among the ivy alongside the driveway. My dad loaded the three of us, ages 6, 4, and 10 months, into our minivan for the 1-mile drive south to St. Augustine Church just off Main Street. We were still Catholic then, but not for long. Upstairs, my mom stood in front of her bureau, looked in the mirror, and saw her own mother, a madwoman whose skin, eyes, and hair had always matched her own. I'm schizophrenic, she thought. The kids will be better off without me. She scribbled a note, grabbed her pills and a bottle of vodka, then marched up to the clapboard shed in our backyard with a black leather belt. Inside, she fastened the belt around her neck, swallowed 13 pills, and let herself drop. She was unconscious before she hit the floor. This was her first attempt. The secret was kept for 15 years until my brother Ted called one afternoon. It was early summer and I was 19. I was driving 90 miles an hour down the highway when I answered my pink flip phone. Meg, he said, did you know Mom tried to hang herself? What? When? A state trooper appeared in my rearview mirror, lights flashing. When we were kids in the shed at the old house in Glastonbury. Did you just remember or something? I slowed down and swerved right. The state trooper followed. Whatever Ted said next was muffled as a memory flickered. I was maybe 4, standing in the doorway leading to our back porch, watching my father walk out of the woods. In his arms, he carried my mother in the pretty way of newlyweds, only she was limp-limbed and her eyes were closed. Asleep, I figured. My dad brushed past me, his brow furrowed as he took her upstairs to bed. In the car, I dropped speed, put a blinker on, and prepared for a ticket. The officer passed me fast on the left, a lucky break, and I stayed in the slow lane, considering this memory. Ted's voice snapped me back to reality. Don't tell anyone I told you, and if I ever get like that, I want you to take a gun and shoot me in the head. Chapter 2, The Trip Home, Part 1. In 2016, 13 years after my brother spilled the secret, I bit my lip as I waited for him at the airport in Connecticut. Since Ted's phone call in 2003, I'd circled the subject of my family like a tiger chained to the pole, scratching at our history, wondering what had happened to my mom and as a result to us. My parents had kept secret that first suicide attempt for so long. What else were they hiding? What else didn't I know? A trip home meant another chance to ask questions. Ted pulled up to the curb and popped the trunk. He remained in the driver's seat, his head hung low over the cell phone cradled in his hands. A pulled-up hoodie obscured his face. His puppy lay with its head down in the passenger seat, gloomy and lethargic. In the last 2 years, Ted and I had barely spoken, and I couldn't pinpoint why. Texts between us were rare, phone calls almost non-existent. When we did speak to each other, our voices strained, like whatever we meant to say was hidden beneath a fortress of lockjawed reticence. Once, he told me I knew nothing about him, which was impossible because Ted knew the totality of my life in a way no one else ever could. We were together for the elemental moments of childhood that forever marked us. We trudged along muddy paths together, scooped up frogs and watched them pee defensively on our dirt-caked hands. Once, we even ran away together. We made it a half block from our house before sitting on the curb to discuss our future in serious tones. What will we eat? We asked each other. We rode the bus together every day of elementary school, and I relished the few times my teacher let me wait for dismissal with my brother in his classroom. Compared with my few friends, Ted had many, but still he was mine. Ted poured my first drink and rolled my first joint. He taught me how to drive and how to play cards. We survived the divorce together and our mom's illness. There's no one else in the world who can reduce me to the softest feelings of childhood with a single phrase, with just a look. I shoved my luggage in the trunk and buckled into the back seat. The dog stayed in front. Ted placed his cell phone on the dashboard, opened the camera app, and pressed record. Something wasn't right. Are you okay? I asked. I'm targeted, he said. I'm being followed. Tears rimmed his eyes. They're following me, he said. Chapter 3, the videos. During the troubling visit home, my mom gave me a stack of old family videos transferred from film to CD. By the time I finally sat down to watch them, another year had ticked by. One afternoon, alone at my desk, I cracked open a beer and slid a disc out from its paper case. With my husband and daughter out of the house, I inserted one of the recordings into my computer drive and pressed play. The opening shot of the film shows the entrance sign to Blish Memorial Park in Marlborough, Connecticut, where my extended family has all gathered early to celebrate both the 4th of July and my little brother's birthday in 1988. My dad first appears in the video through a crowd listening to someone off screen. He casts his eyes downward, clenches his jaw, and walks away. At my desk, I sipped my beer and straightened my back, suddenly aware that I was watching us as a family, that I was about to see what we were like together before so much time had scattered us off to our separate lives. Playing on the screen in front of me was evidence that we'd been together, proof that we existed, with clues to our disintegration. The possibility that my memories were, to whatever degree, real and verifiable. So I watched, hoping to find answers to questions I hardly had language for about who we were during those years that shaped us. The camera pans to my mom, her black bangs teased with volume. She walks by my dad and touches his hair. He tenses and looks the other way. My dad is 29, my mom 31. They've been married for 8 years. The men all wear white collared shirts with some variation of stripes across the middle, their white socks pulled high over topsiders. Their eyeglasses are enormous, gold rimmed and down to the middle of their cheeks. The aunts all wear khaki shorts with sweatshirts. I turned over the CD's envelope in my hand. July 2, 1988 was typed in bold across the flap. Wait a second, I thought, and pressed pause. I opened a file on my computer titled Notes and scrolled through. This file contained the missives I've typed up anytime my mom let slip a morsel of information about us, about herself, the kind of notes I've taken since I could hold a pencil. First suicide attempt, 1988. I picked up the phone to call her. Mom, I asked gently, do you remember the date you went to the hospital that first time? She fell silent and I knew she understood the euphemism. I'm just watching the videos you gave me, I explained, and it occurred to me that they're from that same year. It was Mother's Day, she said like it was yesterday. May 8th, 1988. I got you dressed for church and asked your father to take you. I didn't plan to do anything. Mom, I interrupted, suddenly worried about upsetting her. It's okay, we don't have to go back there. I changed the subject. After the call, I checked the dates online. She was right. 1988, Mother's Day, May 8th, the day of a waning half moon. A younger version of me would have searched for meaning in the metaphor of a waning moon, but I was past the point of symbolism. What I wanted was to clear away the muck, to point to a date on a calendar and say, this led to that, to watch a video and deconstruct the moments that led to our family's collapse and its aftermath. Here's what I knew. 2 months before this video was taken, my mom tried to hang herself in our shed. I wanted to find traces of the incident in our faces, in our movements, our interactions. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As you know, I've read this several times, but it still works on me. It's still compelling. As you know, you saw me reading it on the couch just the other day. Good.
I did.
So I have few questions for you, but to viewers at home, I bet we know at least a few of you. Feel free to interrupt anytime. I'll ask questions, and I have a whole bunch prepared. But as you have questions, just feel free to interrupt, and we can work them in. So please do that. I want to hear your questions. So my first one is, I feel like a good place to start is with the origin story. Books like superhero characters have origin stories. What do you think this book's origin story is? Like, when do you think you first felt the, where was the initial seed or that first itch to write it? What would you trace that back to?
So, I have two answers. The real answer is that, well, let me give you the fake answer first. It's not really a fake answer, but when I think of like what kind of triggered this, I don't know, set of revelations or whatever, it's like I think of that phone call from my brother in the car where he's like, Mom tried to hang herself. And I was just like, what? So I feel like that kind of set me off a bit on this path, because I knew obviously at that point my mom was bipolar. I knew she had tried to kill herself another time, but this kind of just opened up this whole question of like, what else didn't I know? And so I feel like that is kind of, when I was thinking about how this book started a few years ago, that's the moment that I kind of was like, when Ted called, Ted, like, I don't want to say his real name, when Ted called, that kind of set me off. But what I think the real answer is that I've just always have kept diaries, and I've always written about my life in those diaries. And I found a passage recently that was like, from when I was 10 years old, saying like, my life is fit for a book, or whatever. And so I think I just always, I guess I always imagined that I would somehow document my life. Not that I had any idea that what would happen, but so I don't know. I just think I have some kind of compulsion or something to document and then apparently tell people about it.
I embarrass you, stop me. But you are the most like, your personal diaries show up, the actual pages show up in this graphic novel. And you are, I'll just tell people some behind the scenes. You're the most meticulous keeper of diaries and artifacts from your own life that there must be other people like you, but that I've ever met. And during this writing process, you would sometimes have to check something, that happened, or like you're writing a scene, have to check a memory, and it would, I'll tell people at home, it would send her out to like the garage, and there'd be a bunch of bins spread out along the driveway with all these just piles of diaries as she goes through them. So yes, but that's also a really interesting part of this story, because the word detective gets used a lot by like reviewers and people talking about the book. Like, it has a kind of a quality of like a thriller or a detective story or a mystery. As an adult, as you've described, as an adult, you're looking back and trying to piece together what exactly happened in your childhood. Can you tell us a little bit about some of that detective work, because it makes like the story really compelling? It has a lot of momentum, like a detective story would. But what was that process like for you, like going through that? Was it just as enjoyable as it is to read, or that? Tell us a little bit about that kind of like detective work and research and those sorts of things that you did.
I would say it's more enjoyable than even the reading process, because it's like, once, you helped me with that. So I feel like I was naturally just, probing and kind of asking questions, obviously, and looking through old artifacts I had and trying to get information. But then you and I were talking about the book, and you talked to me a lot about momentum and stuff like that, and just kind of scene by scene and how to create momentum and things. And so we talked about the detectiving. And suddenly I felt like I had license to just like spend hours like I didn't, I hadn't thought about like public records exactly. Maybe I had, but like suddenly I just felt like I had this almost like systematic or like permission to explore these things systematically. So I just spent hours indulging myself in like online searches through public archives, or reaching out to like I was reaching out to historical societies trying to get photographs of hospitals that my grandmother had stayed in, or any kind of records. I reached out to archivists. Like, it was great when we had that conversation, because I just felt suddenly like, oh, I can really spend just weeks trying to find as much information as I can, and I'm allowed to, and it's for my book, so I have to. And I just like loved that. So, and I still want to do it. Like, there's still areas where I'm like, well, we didn't get as much information as we could about this. Maybe I can really probe. Like, one of the historical societies, I know they have photographs of the hospital, one of the hospitals my grandma stayed in, and they like kind of wrote back to me twice, but never sent them. And I'm like, I will get those. So anyway, I just think it's actually more enjoyable than reading the book for me, because it's like, finding out real information about my family that is kind of undeniable. Like, you hear stories you ask people stories and they say whatever they say or whatever they remember, but then you find like factual information, and it's nice. I don't know if that answers.
And in the book they read, like clues, and it does really read like a mystery.
That's what it feels like. Yeah.
And of course, it's going to be the nature of this interview that I ask you questions and know the answer, because of course I saw you with like the boxes of archives and Italian birth certificates and emailing historical societies, and there's this story of like the photographer too, who who took that picture. That's a fun anecdote. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm thinking specifically, what's the name of the hospital? Is it Fairfield Hills Hospital or State Hospital? It changed names, but I think it was Fairfield Hills in Connecticut. And it's still kind of there. So it was a huge campus. And first it was for like the criminally insane, I think. And then it was like, well, anybody with psychiatry problems.
And this is where your grandmother was, right? Because your book is also about like the history of like mental illness in your family as it kind of goes across generations. I'm sorry, trying to create context. Go ahead.
No, I know. Thank you. That was helpful. I should do that more. So I was interested in this first hospital she stayed at because it turned out over the course of 30 or 40 years, she had stayed there dozens of times, I think. The admission cards were a little fuzzy, I'll say, but she was there many times. So I was curious about this hospital. So this hospital ended up going defunct in the 90s, but they turned it into like the state or the town hall basically. But it was just kind of abandoned for like 7 years, and all these photographers went in and all these people went in really and kind of explored it and probably took a bunch of stuff. But this one photographer in my deep internet search had gone in and taken these beautiful photographs of the buildings before they were barred. And so I reached out to him to see if I could use some of his photographs as reference. And he didn't get back to me for like 2 months. I mean, I think the pandemic, no. Yeah, I feel like the pandemic had started. Was I really working that late on the book? I think
it was a little late because you were trying to do illustrations of that part of the story, and it was helpful to have the photos in it, and like you were kind of waiting and you hadn't quite heard back from him. Yeah.
So I hadn't heard back from him, so I just decided to use them and draw them. And then he got back to me and he was like, thought it was funny that I was even like asking him like why, like he had broken the law and trespass. He's like, what? Yeah, like, okay, whatever, I don't care. But he was super nice. So anyway, I think his name is Rob Dobie. He's a Connecticut illustrator and photographer. Anyway, his photographs are amazing. But I'm just like so regretful because I wish I had known about this hospital earlier on, because I would have trespassed also. But now nobody will let me, and I've tried. I might try again, but anyway, yeah, that's that story.
Well, I just wanted to ask questions about the research process and the detectiving, as we call it, in that aspect of the story, which is a great part of the book. But also, I know you wrote this for a long time. I have to pretend like I don't know answers as I'm asking you, but I know you wrote this for a long time. 15 years is the number you usually say, and you couldn't have known it would be published the whole time. There were probably years there where it was just a kind of a personal project. So I guess I'm wondering, like, the process, do you think that, like, what do you think you wanted from the process of writing the book? And do you think it, like, you had accomplished that, the act of writing it and publishing accomplished what you wanted? If you're able to articulate like what it was you wanted, maybe it was just more of a drive, I'm not sure.
I mean, I don't think I knew early on. I think I was like really angry at my parents, and like I just wanted to understand this story, I think. And I feel like I just wanted to defy them because they were like early on when I was a younger woman. It's like they wanted to not talk about it, sweep it under the rug or whatever. And I hated that. I mean, it's like I just can't keep secrets. Like I don't like it. I feel like it makes me feel bad. And I'm like, why can't we just talk about this? Whatever. So I feel like I was just kind of angry when I started and just was like, I'm gonna write this down, and then it's gonna be not as bad for me, because like then I don't have to like carry all this with me. I think that's all I really knew. And then I really can't explain. I mean, I have no idea like what drives anybody to do anything for 15 years, and I don't know the answer to that, other than like I'm really stubborn and I like finishing things or something. I mean, no, not really. I don't know. It's like I know I'm stubborn. I know that I just had this like I did have like a drive to figure out the story. But it wasn't until like 2016ish that I really, you and I talked and you were like, you just need to finish your book. And you were like, you need to write your book start to finish, because I kept writing essays or like little pieces of the story. And you were like, stop that, like just write the whole thing. And I'm like, I think you're right. And so I got a residency at McDowell, and I just tried to draft the entire thing from the pieces I had and whatever I didn't have. And then that kind of gave me focus from there. Like, okay, this is a real manuscript. I can keep working on this story. And that was the point that actually like I felt like it could be a book. I mean, I wouldn't have said that in grad school. I would have been like, of course it's a book, it's awesome. But it wasn't.
I think it can take a long time to find a shape.
Yeah.
To a story. So, okay, I have lots of more questions here. I just have to decide which one I want to ask. You know what? Let's talk about let's switch over to, we've been talking about sort of the story and the process. Let's talk about illustrations for a little bit.
Okay.
So I also want to ask you a question about genre, but we'll just ask about illustrations for a minute. I love your maps. I think you must be, I'm your husband, so I'm biased, but I think you just must be one of the world's most charming map makers. A lot of people like your maps. You make them for like a lot of magazines, and you've made them for other people's books. You love drawing maps, and you like drawing architecture, the interior of houses. What do you think like draws you to that? I guess people already saw some during your reading, but so I don't maybe have to show any more interiors of houses. But what do you think draws you to that, like sort of like maps and architecture and drawing those sorts of things?
It feels like information to me. So I feel like in the same way that all these stories of my family were kind of floating around and they're not pinned down and they feel fluid, because anytime you talk to somebody about a memory, it changes. So every time I've talked to my mom about her suicide attempts, it changes. Like it's more layered, or maybe something little shifts, or I learned something else or whatever. And I feel like with maps in particular, spaces like that, I mean, my brain, it's like I can't figure out space. I can't get from point A to point Z like without a GPS, actually, let's be honest, or a navigator. So I feel like all of it is just a way for me to kind of like put information on paper, which makes it feel more stable. So it's like space is like this, wide open thing. But if I draw it in a map, then it's like, okay, I can see kind of like how something connects to something else. And it's the same with like a story, like, or a memory. It's like anybody, my mom will have one version of something, my dad will have a different version, my brothers will have different versions, I'll have a different version. if I can like triangulate and write it all down in one place, then it feels like, okay, this is a version. And it just feels like getting information correct on paper feels really like comforting to me. And it's like, is it correct? Like my maps aren't correct. And I'm sure I'm not getting every story correct, as you know, but what is correct? I don't know. So there's a lot of questions there, but that's how it feels to me. It feels like pinpointing information that might otherwise be kind of like fluid.
Thank you. We have a audience question, which if it's okay, I'll just go ahead and read. Is that right?
Yeah.
From Sherry. The question is, you're an illustrator and a writer. Did you always know the book would take the form of a graphic novel? I feel that form is so important to the storytelling power of this book.
Thank you. Yeah, I did always know it would be a visual book because I think it's just my way of processing information, and so I just always have worked with like in my diaries, for instance, it's mostly writing, but there's always pictures drawn in here and there. And then when I actually started working on this, I guess in grad school, like I didn't ever even question, like it just always was visual. So yeah, I think I always knew that. I feel like I was gonna say something else about that, but I can't remember what it was. So I'll end there.
So you always wanted it to be visual.
Yeah.
I feel like there were some questions along the way though. I mean, there was a moment when
yeah,
you thought maybe you might just do manuscript. Is that right?
Well, sorry, that's what I was
briefly,
gonna say.
a brief moment. Yeah.
I didn't think that. It was that my agent asked me, like, do you really want to illustrate this? Like, do you really need to? And I was like, yeah, I think I do. And it just made me sad. Like, it made me sad to think of the book without pictures. And even now, so the funny thing is that graphic memoirs sell worse than like a regular, straight textbook. So I think that's what he was getting at. But when I think of the manuscript, which I've seen in text form and I enjoy reading it, but it's like, I just feel like it's missing a kind of richness and depth. And so even though the process of illustrating things is like, it's laborious and miserable, and like I literally thought I was going to dislocate my shoulder by the end of it. Like I was in physical pain, but I'm so happy because the book has both, like the, a story and the pictures, and I just feel like it would just be really missing something if it didn't have that. So
I like it too. It gives, I mean, it is a story that has a lot of difficulty and can sometimes be dark, but there's a little bit of like lightness to the illustrations, so like balance that. I've heard like a lot of readers say that as well.
Yeah.
You're also, and this is a good segue to talking about genre, because you're getting a lot of responses from readers who have never read graphic memoir before. And you and I have talked about this, and I think we sort of thought that after, say, like Mouse, Fun Home, Persepolis, that a lot of people are sort of familiar with this genre, but you're getting a lot of people who have never encountered it before. And it's, the genre has like kind of a crazy name, right? Because there's like comics and the graphic novels, and then some people are calling it graphic novel memoir, which makes sense. But so where do you think you fit in this sort of genre? Because if people know memoir, they know graphic novel, but you also, your process, you tend to write first, which I guess like a lot of comics do. Like it's like a comics writer like Neil Gaiman will write like a script first, but you write everything out first for your process. And where do you think your book fits, like in those, between those genres, between like nonfiction, between like memoir and graphic novel? Because on the other hand, you have like a lot more text and you're not using panels. I don't know, how would you describe your own book in terms of like where it fits between all those things? Or can you, or does it matter to you?
I mean, it doesn't matter to me really, except that I guess, we had to categorize it on Amazon, for instance, or whatever, or bookstores have to categorize it. So I don't, like, as a person making stuff, I don't ever think about it, but then when, it's done, and so now I think about it, it's like, I think of it as graphic memoir, but maybe you would say like literary graphic memoir, because it probably, I haven't checked word counts, but I'm sure that my manuscript is much, much longer than all the books you just mentioned. I mean, longer than
I think it has the same numbers. I think it has the same number of words as some short novels do, which is a lot more than
it's 40,000 words. So it's like, it's really long. So I don't know what that means, but I do think that that's what allows for that bridge, because it's not like the action, it's not like panel to panel action in regular comics. There's not much text, and a lot that happens through the images, through the panels, or actions taking place in the panels. And so I don't have any of that. I have these like environments you walk into, or a map that gives you additional information. And so I think for people who don't read comics, it might be a little bit more of a bridge from reading books with just text to something more visual. Because I just worked so long on just the story, trying to get it so that it could read on its own, which I think it can. I mean, I wouldn't do it, but I think it can be read on its own.
I think it can. I have read it on its own, so I can say that it can.
Yeah, that's
true. You know, one thing I love about it, if I'm allowed to say this, is about this aspect of it, basically having so many words, more words than the usual graphic novel. Is that sometimes when I love graphic novels, you know, our whole family does. We all read like the Raina Telgemeier graphic novels and lots of them. I love them, but sometimes when I remember a graphic novel, I remember the printed page, just like the illustration.
Oh.
But when I remember like a novel or, you know, a memoir, usually I remember like the mental theater I created, whatever I imagined from the words, and created that visualization, mental theater. And I feel like in your book, I get both. I get like the both and, because there are some scenes that are just, you completely conjure from text. And so there's some scenes that really engage that mental theater in the way that there are other graphic novels do, but maybe, I don't know of any that do it to the extent of yours, maybe just because a lot of graphic novels don't have so many scenes that are just in text. So anyway, it's one of my favorite parts of reading. So I feel like your book has that aspect for me as a reader.
Do you feel like that's like distracting? Because I'm suddenly thinking like, oh, well, what if there's competing things? Like if you read a scene that's written out, but then there's an image with it, like can you remember both, or is it?
I think you can. I mean, I think sometimes Fun Home also does this as well. There'll be like narration boxes and then an image, and they don't totally match up. So I do see it happen. Maybe not to the extent that yours do, but it's another reason why I like Fun Home, because, you know, by Alison Bechtel, that it does that as well.
Of course.
And but I don't find it distracting. I mean, people are liking it, I feel that your mind can do two things at once, and so I think it's a bonus. I'm reading some stuff that's coming here in the chat as well. So, and some people are saying you can like the process maybe like slows down a little bit as well, so you can it affects the pace. All right, I think we're on to another question. So we talked about genre, about how it's a little bit heavier in words than other graphic novels. What would you say? Because one thing about the sheer number of words is that you cut a lot. I know you cut a lot out of the initial manuscript. And so, which means you basically, if it's like 40,000 words, you wrote a novel's worth and had to kind of cut it down to a graphic novel's worth. I think some of that is finding the shape. Like you have life information is like a fire hydrant of information, and you had to somehow find shape out of the mess of life. Can you talk a little bit about that, whether at all the different stages where you kind of had information overload and you had to like craft it and make it into the story?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one reason it took so long, is because I just, you know, you don't know what it is when you start, which is one of the hardest parts about writing for me, is finding structure. Shape is like a nicer word. I always call it structure, but I'm working on a second project, and that's the thing I don't know right now. And I'm like full of anxiety that it's going to take me 15 more years. Be like a very old lady by the time. Anyway, so I think what I did over time was I just kept making lists of like memories that it felt important to me and trying to order them, and then writing scenes. And so I feel like I just went back and forth doing that. They're probably in my desk, but I have like bunches of notebooks where it's like okay, I think this is the order of things, and then I'm just writing scenes and scenes and scenes, and then I go back and I'm like, wait, is that the right order, or like did I miss something or what? And so it kind of is like I thought about my memories that felt important to the book, and then I just wrote them out. Yeah, I listed them, I tried to order them, I tried to talk to people, so like I tried to talk to my family members to try and get additional information to see what I was missing. And then I wrote them by scene, and it became easier over time. Like once I started, especially once I was working with an editor and I really understood how the book would kind of move, then I still had to keep writing because, you know, she wanted it to be really generational. So I had to add a lot about my brother and some stuff about my grandma. And so once I knew that that was the focus, it was easier to like pull things out and say like, okay, I need to write about this, but this can go. And I love that process. Like cutting things just makes me feel happy because I mean, there's a sadness like, did I just waste all this time, or like, am I losing something? But I just felt like I can use this for something later on. This is fine. I'm going to set it aside. And so I just loved that process. It felt like it's like taking a bath, you know, renewal. It's just like, you're like, okay, I'm like clearing away the muck. I'm just like focusing on the through line here. So I loved that process. Once I understood like the general shape of the book, of cutting anyway. But yeah, and then later, as you know, a lawyer made me cut a couple things too.
That's an interesting part of the process too. Yeah, the fact checking process. Like you did meticulous research yourself, but then yeah, you also sat down at the kitchen table over multiple sessions of hours while lawyers and fact checkers asked you question after question after question, which is great. That was a really fascinating process.
I loved it.
Yeah.
And I was like delighted when they were like setting up calls with the lawyers. I was like, yes, I will talk to you.
Yeah. That is like a really fun part of the process. Yeah, you know, I mean, in terms of process, it's like however you can get the work done is how you can get done. I know some people draw and write at the same time, but it did seem like an advantage for you for your particular process to write everything out because you could expand it and contract it. And I know you have a really good, I haven't met your agent and or editor, but I know you sing their praises all the time, and that you really enjoy that process of working with both of them. Yeah, you really
and they both
lucked
edited
out an agent editor.
Yeah, and they both edited at different times, like my agent first, obviously, and then the editor, and they both helped me so much. So yes, I really am grateful to them. As I keep posting on Instagram, which is probably annoying to them, but it's fine.
Let me see here. I'm not sure if we have audience questions. Feel free to interrupt me at any time if we're still talking. Hi.
Hi. I have some questions too.
Please, yes, please go for it.
That I'm happy to ask. I feel like I'm at a very unique opportunity as like a reader who gets to ask the burning questions that they have to the author. But I know I was talking a lot with a fellow coworker of mine at Grassroots about your choice of black and white coloring. So we know with Alison Bechdel, she wrote Are You My Mother? And her theme is like pinks. And then also in Fun Home, for her father, it's in blues. Is there a choice of yours to make it only in black and white? Did you ever think about color?
I did think about color, and at one point I was like gonna try and do washes like Alison Bechdel was exactly like Fun Home was exactly my thinking. But color just never looks right to me. It doesn't feel like me, and I think I just love black and white. Like I love the combination. It's like the most stark thing. There was a period where I was thinking I could make it more Persepolis like, which is very stark, just black and whites. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's even washes in it. I think it's just black or white. And so I was trying that, but I felt like I couldn't get the images as strong as in Persepolis. So then I developed this style, or I mean, I don't know whatever it is called, but like with the washes in the back to kind of give like a depth and hopefully like a richness to the illustrations and just to help organize space. But yeah, it's like I try color but it just doesn't, it just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, I can't do it. You know, it's like sometimes clients will have me do things in color and I try really hard and I do it and it's fine, but like I never love it as much as black and white. Like when a client is like, can you draw it in black and white? I'm like, thank you. It's like, you get my soul, you know? So yeah, it had to be black and white.
Awesome. And I think I mean, it's beautiful. I think it works really well. But I was curious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another question you touched on it a little bit, is the fact that you draw a lot of spaces and a lot of rooms, and a lot less people. So you do draw your family and the story is very much about you growing up and your family, but I'd say they're not, the main illustrations that you draw are the houses and the hospitals. Was there like a certain reason that you decided I don't want to draw my family a lot, or was that a conscious thought for you?
At first it wasn't. I mean, 10 years ago or something, like I drew a lot of word bubbles and then I drew a lot of objects and then I drew some rooms. But then over time I was getting the question, like, why aren't there people? And my first thought is like, it was sort of my instinct. Like I'm trying to draw these memories. And when I think about the memories, I think about the places where they took place, where they happened. And so I wanted in the book people to be able to kind of like enter into these environments or see them or see what I see in my memory, like, or see a house or a building or something. And then, so I think when you draw people, you're like very clearly saying like, here's this person, here's what they look like, here's what they were wearing. And it almost like felt too limiting to me or something. Like I wanted the reader to be able to kind of enter into the space and not just look into the space or look at somebody else doing something. So there's that. It's also hard to draw people and I don't like it. So I think that I need to acknowledge that as well. But I mean, I think just intuitively as I was working, I just never drew people. And I had to force myself here because I was like, there should be people in it. I want readers to see like what my family looks like over time. So I just use the photographs and videos and stuff to kind of do that work.
Gotcha. Another question I had, and I think I might know the answer to this, but I was curious why your text is all in all caps. Did you have a reason behind that?
No, I think I made my handwriting into a font, and I think I just looked at other comic books and was kind of like, okay, this is standard. I know not everybody does it, but it looked neater to me. I think I actually did try to do sentence case, so upper and lower case, but it looked it was too small or something, or it just looked messy. So I think having it in all caps, I could kind of make it feel a little more standardized, and maybe easier to read. I know my handwriting's small, and even still, I feel like I read a review that was like, the handwriting's really small in this book, and I'm like, sorry. So I think I was just trying to make it more legible.
Okay. I was asking because there's a scene at the end. I guess it's not the end. It's when you and Christian are in your first apartment and your siblings come to visit and you're playing a card game, a drinking card game. And you mentioned that Ted, your oldest brother, wrote down the rules and he writes in all caps. So I didn't know if that played into it.
Yeah, no, I mean, he does. And I don't. Yeah, no, I don't, like in my diaries or when I'm just writing. I don't, unless I'm doing like a headline or something. But so no, that just is a coincidence.
Well, it's a cool coincidence. And then I was wondering, first of all, actually, I have a question for both of you, Christian. So if you will turn your screen back on.
Come back to us.
Yeah, it's not explicitly mentioned in your book, but you both obviously met. You're both writers. You're both studied at similar places. First of all, what was it like meeting? How did you guys meet? And then also, what's it like being married to a fellow writer?
Christian, why don't you answer the first question? I'll answer the second question.
The second one, we met at Yaddo, which is a writing residency in upstate New York, where we were with a bunch of other creative people. And then weren't like together then. We were like friends. We met like a lot of people. But I got a crush on her, and and so we started emailing and tried to convince her to have a crush on me as well, and eventually succeeded. And we
were like really good. I feel like we were like fast friends. Like we just at Yaddo, like we spent hours and hours and hours talking. I mean, I did with a lot of people, but I feel like you and I especially.
It was a friends first, but we just connected really easily in conversation. Yeah, so we weren't romantic at Yaddo, but eventually we were. I convinced you over many emails, and that's how it worked. And we were long distance for like a long time too. So actually, we did some of this right here on Skype.
Yeah,
it was back then. So we did like 11-hour Skype sessions certain times.
It's so embarrassing. I lost my voice like the first couple of times we talked. I was teaching too, and I went in and it was like, hey everybody.
Exactly. That was same. Yeah, and then you wanted to answer the second one, but I'll just say it's great because you're helping me on my mess of manuscript right at this very moment. You're reading my giant mess and trying to help me shape it. So
it's not a mess and I love it. But yeah, no, I would just say it's amazing, especially a fiction writer, because Christian helped me so much with the technique. So like scene, dialogue, momentum, like these craft techniques that I didn't learn in studying nonfiction. I mean, I was also in a program that was a little more experimental, I would say. So they talk about like interiority and like writing down your thoughts and write about this and then write about that and the associations. And so I didn't know how to write in scene or tell a story, like you talk about. I think of it as conversation as like when I tell a story about something, I might try and set the scene for you or say what happened. So Christian helped me a ton with that, and I feel like got the book to such a much better place because of that. So I totally recommend marrying a writer.
I recommend
not for everyone, but I recommend it.
I recommend it as well. It's so hard to find readers. That's what's so hard to find. Like you have that in certain. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you, but I'm remembering that at Yaddo, Charles Bach was like, never marry a writer. It's the worst idea ever, wasn't he? I feel like we were getting that advice.
I think he was, yeah. Our friend, the novelist, Charles Bach.
Who then married a writer, but it didn't work out.
Yeah. Yeah, you probably did say that. It probably also works too, because we're in different genres. I do my magical weird stuff and you tend toward nonfiction. I don't know, not that it wouldn't work otherwise, but it feels very close because it's still all story, but then also a little bit different at the same time. And we tend to read different books, which has been great for me. I teach a lot of the books that you introduced me to. Like I teach Educated by Tara Westover and a bunch of nonfiction you introduced me to. So that's nice too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Margaret, being such a detailed, like keeping your things, do you still have all those emails from Christian from that time?
Oh, I do. And I'm actually reading through them for my new book project, which might be a mistake, but I'm reading them.
I have a competing book project. No,
I know. They're embarrassing and they're lengthy. Christian would write very long emails.
Aww.
Very detailed.
A lot of persuading to do. So.
He had a lot of feelings.
Worked out.
It did.
I think that would be great to be married to another writer, because also like you're intimately aware of, at least in Margaret's case, Christian, you know her family, you know what she's trying to get out of this book and what she's trying to do with it, and you're probably the best person to be able to then be like, this is working, this is not. I think that's great. That's super awesome.
It is a lot of fun. Yeah, we take these things I'm gonna use the word plot walks, because I heard Michael Chabon, who's married to a writer.
Yeah.
They take these like plot walks, and I think we do that too sometimes, where we just like kind of walk around the neighborhood and talk about how do I figure this out, and like little kinks in the manuscript. So yeah.
Yeah.
And then another question, you did mention that you wrote out the whole script first and then kind of did the illustrations after that. When you, how do you even approach, like, did you have ideas in your head? Okay, this scene, I really want to draw this thing. How did those illustrations kind of come out to you?
So, I should say in early drafts of the manuscript, I worked simultaneously. So I was writing and drawing at the same time, but it made everything impossible to edit and worse because I wasn't focusing on one or the other. I was just like, and I was being more experimental, like associations and stuff, rather than kind of focusing on how do you move a plot along, or a story along. So some of the things that I drew early on are still in the book, like certain rooms or certain houses or whatever. But how do I decide? So I think some things are obvious to me, like I wanted all the chapter breaks, or as many as I could, not every single one, but I wanted them to be houses. The original book, I feel like the word houses was in the title, and I just was interested in like all the houses we lived in, because we moved around so much. So I knew that. And sometimes it's totally clear to me, like, oh, I'm showing my childhood bedroom or whatever. And then other times I want to document something. So I'll show a building, or I'll show some artifact I find. And then sometimes I just have to slog through. It's like I sketch until, little thumbnails until I find the composition I like the best. And it could be like, oh, that's the most interesting thing to show. Or it could be like, that's prettiest. And I'll just, I just choose. And that's the one I hate the most, because it's like, it can be a long process to try and figure out what to draw. But yeah.
Okay. Oh, I think we have a question in the Q&A. Yes, we have a question. Which scene did you most enjoy illustrating?
I love drawing I love drawing all the artifacts, because I just find it so fun. And like we were talking about earlier, it's like documentation of something. Like it feels like double documentation. So, I drew, I hate saying this on these things, but divorce papers and stuff like that, in case my parents ever like see the recording of this and are horrified because they haven't read the book, but or they haven't read the illustrated version. But the one I love the most, I'm trying to see, I'm just going to share my screen for a second. So it's not a scene, but the illustration I loved the most is this one, because, and I feel like that I kind of ripped off Raina Telgemeier, who had this scene in one of the Babysitters Club graphic novels and it just had a house and it had this like 3/4 view, and I thought it was so cool. And so I just loved kind of trying to figure out the space here and trying to figure out the angles and how to draw it, and then what was in each room. And once I figured out, like, I lost my mouse. Just hold on. There we go. Just stop sharing. Once I figured out like this is what I wanted to do, it actually went kind of fast because I just like loved it so much. So that was my favorite thing to draw. And I drew that last. That was the last thing I edited.
Reminds me of like a dollhouse, you know what I mean? That view.
Yeah.
And then you like already play out the different things that happen in different rooms. I thought that was very cool.
It's like so fun. I kind of was like, I want to draw more houses like this, but I had to stop. So
okay. And my last question is, we talked about this, that graphic memoir, graphic illustration, illustrated manuscript, anything. This genre is something that I love personally, and I want to see more of. But what advice would you give someone who's like, I think I want to approach this, I think I want to do an illustrated memoir? What is something that your sage wisdom that you could give someone?
So I think my biggest advice is to study both things separately. So visual artists tend not to be, not all of them, but they tend not to be as good at giving feedback on like story, on, the writing, and writers tend not to be as not to give as good a feedback on illustration or, you know, visual stuff. So my biggest advice is like study the two things separately. Become, you know, I think with illustration, you just have to get methodical and fast, and being a professional illustrator helped me because I had a system. Like, it's like you do your thumbnails, sketches, ink, done. Like, so I have a pretty efficient process for that. So that helped, because a book is a big illustration project. And then with writing, it's like, I mean, like I said about being married to a fiction writer, but I think studying how to write scene, how to write dialogue, how to create momentum, and how to create a through line to get from the beginning of the book to the end, and figuring out, you know, the best path through that, I think is essential, you know, to making a good story. So I recommend studying both things.
That's great. Great to know. And then we have one last question, actually, from an audience member, which is a really interesting question. They say, I noticed there's an audiobook. How do you feel about that? I assume the publisher recommended that.
I feel good about it. I mean, I haven't actually listened to it. We were talking the other day, like we should maybe listen to that. But actually my agent recommended it, and the publisher was totally on board because they thought the manuscript was pretty strong on its own. And so they were, and you know, he had also recommended I don't illustrate it at one point, but they thought it would stand on its own as an audiobook. So I'm totally fine with it. I mean, my aunt and uncle, I learned the other day, listened to it on audiobook, and I was kind of grateful for that, because there's like that whole makeout scene with my boyfriend from 7th grade, and there's like all these side notes in my diaries that I just really don't need them reading about like gross stuff we did. So I'm actually grateful for the audiobook. But yeah, I haven't actually listened to it myself yet, but I need to.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of adapts and how it transfers over.
Yeah, I think it's like, you know, it's like you don't get all the additional stuff from the illustrations, but I think it's probably easier in some ways. So
I wish I could remember the voice actor's name, but you did get to get to sort of choose her from a bunch of people, and she has a really great voice.
She had an amazing voice. I wish I could remember her name too, but she's fantastic. So yeah, I'm sure she does an excellent job.
That's really cool you got to choose. Wow. All right, well, we are at time. It has been a lovely hour. Thank you both so much for joining Grassroots today for this event. I really enjoyed your book, Margaret, and I was really happy to be here with you. And this event, thank you everyone for joining us today for this event, but it will also be on our YouTube if you want to watch it again, share it with friends, and then you can always buy Margaret's book, And Now I Spill the Family Secrets, at Grassroots, either on our website or in our storefront. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you so much. And thanks to Grassroots. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. This is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Bye.